Hi. Today I have a story from a subscriber that will make you question reality. At first he thought it was just a dream, until he found proof that it wasn't. Now he's reaching out to us hoping that someone else has experienced the same thing. Let's find out. It started like any other night. I had worked late, again, and was taking the subway home. The city was the same as always, damp and cold. Street lights reflecting in puddles on the sidewalk. I just wanted to get home, heat up some leftovers, and maybe fall asleep in front of the TV. That was the plan. The train was nearly empty when I got on. A couple of people sat scattered in the seats, staring at their phones or just zoning out like I was. I took my usual spot near the middle of the car, leaning against the window, eyes half closed. The hum of the train on the tracks was almost soothing. That's when he sat down. I barely noticed him at first, just another commuter. But then he spoke. Long day. His voice was friendly, casual, too casual. I glanced at him, forcing a polite nod. He was about my age, maybe a little older, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. Nothing stood out about him, but something about the way he was looking at me felt off. Like he knew me, like he was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. Must be exhausting, he continued, smiling like we were old friends. I remember you used to complain about that when you were a kid. Always saying you'd never end up stuck in an office job like your dad. My stomach twisted. I turned to face him fully. I'm sorry. Do we know each other? His smile didn't change. Of course we do. I was sure I had never seen this man before in my life. I don't think so, I said carefully. He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. Yeah, you always say that the first time. I stared at him, my pulse picking up. The first time? What did that mean? Look, I said, forcing a laugh. I think you've got me mixed up with someone else. No, Daniel. I froze. I hadn't told him my name. The train rattled along the tracks, but suddenly, it felt too quiet. Like the world had shrunk down to just me and him. How do you know my name? My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. He just smiled again. Come on, I know everything about you. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. Your childhood dog, Daisy, right? You cried for days when she ran away. Your mom said she wanted to live on a farm, but you always knew that was a lie. My breath caught in my throat. Your apartment? 3rd floor, 2nd door on the left. You leave your window unlocked because you like the fresh air, but lately, you've been waking up feeling like someone's been in your room, haven't you? I shot up from my seat. Who the hell are you? He leaned back, completely relaxed, watching me like this was all some kind of joke. You told me, he said simply. Told you what? All of it. I took a step back, my heart hammering. That's not possible. He tilted his head slightly, eyes dark and amused. You told me. Last time, the subway car rattled around me. I looked around at the other passengers, but no one was paying attention. No one seemed to hear what was happening. I turned back to the man, and for the first time, I saw something different in his expression. Not amusement, not smugness, pity, like he'd been through this before, like he already knew what was coming next. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. The train was still moving. My stop was coming up. I could just get off and walk away from this. Maybe it was some weird prank. Maybe I was just tired. Yeah, that had to be it. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because as I turned away, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the subway window. And the man sitting next to me, he wasn't in it. I blinked. My reflection stared back at me from the subway window, my face pale, my eyes wide. The man beside me, the one talking like he knew my whole life, he wasn't there. I turned back, my breath shallow. He was sitting right next to me, clear as day, smiling, watching. I looked at the window again. Nothing. Just me. A cold wave rushed through my body. What's wrong, Daniel? He asked, tilting his head slightly. I couldn't answer. My brain was scrambling, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the light, maybe the angle, but no, the reflection should have been there. He let out a small sigh, as if he had seen this all before. "You always get stuck here," he murmured. "At this part?" I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His smile didn't fade, but something in his eyes shifted. A flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "You'll figure it out." I shook my head. "No, seriously, who are you? How do you know all this about me?" "I told you," he said again. "You told me." My hands clenched into fists. "I've never met you before." He just smiled. I glanced around the subway car. Nobody was looking. Nobody seemed to notice what was happening. An old man scrolled through his phone. A woman in a business suit stared blankly at the floor. A teenage kid with headphones bobbed his head to music I couldn't hear. None of them saw this. None of them cared. I turned back to him, my pulse hammering. "If I told you all this, then tell me when. Tell me where." He tapped his fingers on his knee. "I wish I could." "Why can't you?" His smile faded for the first time. "Because you don't remember yet." Something about the way he said that made my stomach twist. The train rumbled on, the lights flickering for a brief second. I exhaled sharply, gripping the pole next to me. I just needed to get off at my stop. Get out of here. Get home. The man watched me, as if he could hear my thoughts. "You think leaving will fix it, don't you?" I didn't answer. "It won't." I gritted my teeth. "I don't know what kind of game this is, but it's not a game." His voice was calm, steady. "It never is." The train slowed down. My stop. I reached for my bag and stood up fast. "I don't care what you think you know about me, but I'm done talking to you." I pushed toward the doors, ready to get out. The air felt thick, like the whole subway car had closed in on me. The doors didn't open. I froze. I looked up at the electronic sign. My stop's name flashed on the screen. The train was stopped, but the doors just stayed shut. I pressed the button to open them. Nothing. A weird buzzing sound filled the car, like a speaker shorting out. I turned back. The man was still sitting, hands folded in his lap, watching me. "I told you not to do that." My hands clenched. "What?" He sighed. "You always try to leave here, but it never works." I pounded on the door. "Hey, open the doors." No one reacted. The old man kept scrolling his phone. The woman in the suit didn't even blink. The kid with the headphones stared at nothing, like they weren't real, like none of this was real. The train lurched, jerking forward. My stop disappeared behind us. I spun around, my chest tight. "Where are we going?" The man leaned back, stretching his arms over the seat. "Nowhere new. You've been here before." I shook my head. No, I haven't." He gave me a sad smile. "Yes, you have. You just don't remember yet." I felt dizzy, like the train wasn't just moving forward, but pulling me somewhere I didn't want to go. I grabbed my phone out of my pocket, my hands shaking. If I could just call someone, text someone, anything. I looked at the screen. I stopped breathing. The time was wrong. Completely wrong. My phone said it was 3 months ago. I checked my messages. The last ones were from numbers I didn't recognize. Conversations I didn't remember having. Some of them weren't even full texts, just random words, half-finished sentences. Like someone had typed a mid-thought and then forgot. And one unread message. No number. No contact name. Just a blank sender. I clicked on it. "Don't talk to him." I stared at the words, my fingers feeling numb. Slowly, I looked back at the man. He was still watching me, but his smile was gone now. For the first time, he looked serious, almost afraid. "Daniel," he said quietly, "you need to remember, before it resets." The train lights flickered. The world tilted. And then, everything went black. I woke up with a jolt. The subway car was the same. The hum of the train, the dull fluorescent lights, the faint scent of metal and dust. I was still sitting in my seat, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles were white. For a second, I thought I had just dozed off. Maybe I imagined all of it. But then I looked to my right. He was still there, still sitting next to me, still watching me. "That one hit you hard, didn't it?" he asked casually, like we were just two co-workers chatting on the ride home. I shot up from my seat, my breath coming fast. What just happened?" He exhaled, rubbing his hands together like he was warming them up. "It reset." "What reset?" I was almost shouting now. No one reacted. The same passengers sat in the same seats, looking at their phones, staring at nothing. Like they hadn't moved at all. Like they weren't even aware of me. "The loop," the man said, shrugging. "It always resets when you get too close." My stomach twisted. Too close to what? He smiled. But it wasn't amusement this time. It was something else. Figuring it out, I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I grabbed my phone again. The date was still wrong. 3 months off. My last text still didn't make sense. And that message, the one with no sender, was still there. "Don't talk to him." I looked back up at the man, my heart pounding. "What is this?" He studied me for a moment, like he was deciding how much to tell me. Then he sighed. "Think, Daniel." I swallowed. "Think about what?" "What's the last thing you remember before getting on this train?" I opened my mouth. Stopped. I couldn't remember. I remembered work, sitting at my desk, staring at the clock. I remembered grabbing my bag, leaving the office, heading toward the subway station. But the details were missing. What day was it? What was the weather like? Who had I talked to last? It was all a blur. My breathing got heavier. I sat back down, gripping my knees. "This doesn't make any sense." The man nodded. "It never does at first." I ran a shaky hand through my hair. "What do you mean at first?" He turned toward me, his expression unreadable. "This isn't the first time we've had this conversation." I felt my chest tighten. "Yes, it is," I said quickly. "I've never seen you before. I've never talked to you before." He just shook his head. "You said the same thing last time." My whole body felt cold. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was impossible, that I would remember something like this. But something in his eyes told me he wasn't lying. And worse, somewhere deep in my gut, I felt like I already knew that. The train rumbled on. The lights flickered again, just for a second. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of my seat. If this isn't the first time, then what happens next? The man watched me carefully. He hesitated. "You forget again?" The word sent a chill through my body. "No." I shook my head. "I won't." He gave me that same sad smile. "You always do." I clenched my fists. "Then tell me what to do. How do I stop it?" He sighed. "You have to remember." "Remember what?" I snapped. His face darkened. "How you got here?" I opened my mouth, ready to yell, demand answers, but then I felt it. That pressure again. Like the whole subway car was closing in. The lights flickered harder this time, longer. The walls seemed to stretch, then pull back. I gritted my teeth. "No, not again." The man leaned in, his voice urgent. "Daniel, listen to me. You have to focus. The moment it happens, the moment everything resets, hold on to something real." The pressure built. My ears rang. "What does that mean?" I shouted. His eyes locked onto mine. "Something that won't change. Something that won't disappear when the loop resets." The world twisted. The lights burst into static white. The last thing I saw was his face. And then, everything went black. I gasped. I was back on the subway. Same seat. Same dim lights. Same low hum of the train on the tracks. I shot up, looking around. The old man with the phone. The businesswoman staring at nothing. The kid with headphones. All of them exactly where they had been before. I turned my head slowly. The man was sitting next to me. Again. He sighed. "You're back." I staggered backward, my breath shaky. My body felt weak, like I had just run for miles. My hands were trembling. "No," I muttered. No, this can't be happening." I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers. The date was still wrong. I checked my texts. The same unread message. Don't talk to him. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone so tightly it hurt. You okay? The man asked, watching me carefully. I ignored him. I pressed the power button on my phone, then turned it back on. I opened my text again. The message was still there. The same message. The same words. Don't talk to him. It was real. This was real. I wasn't dreaming. I felt like I was going to be sick. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Then another. I needed to stay calm. I needed to think. I sat back down, gripping my knees. Okay, I muttered. Okay, let's say this is real, that I'm stuck in some kind of loop. I swallowed. How do I stop it? The man exhaled, rubbing his hands together. You're getting there? I looked at him sharply. Stop talking in riddles. Just tell me what's happening. He hesitated. Then, quietly, he said, I can't. A wave of frustration hit me. Why not? He turned his head, watching the passengers around us. His voice was barely a whisper. Because if I say too much, it resets faster. I clenched my teeth. This was impossible. It was like trying to put together a puzzle while someone kept snatching the pieces away. But I remembered what he told me last time. Hold on to something real. Something that won't disappear when the loop resets. I needed proof. Something I could use to remember. I grabbed my phone again and opened the Notes app. Hands shaking, I typed, You're stuck in a loop. The man knows what's happening. Find a way to break it. I hit save. I stared at the screen, willing it to stay there. Then I looked at the man. Is this going to disappear when it resets? He gave me a sad smile. You'll find out. The subway rumbled on. My stop was coming up. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to try the doors this time. That's what I did before, and it didn't work. I needed a different approach. I looked around the subway car. Everything felt off, like a movie set, like a place designed to look real. But if you stared at it too long, the illusion started to crack. The passengers were too still. Their movements were robotic. The old man never blinked. I turned to the stranger. Who are they? I asked. He followed my gaze, then shook his head. Not important. Are they real? A pause. Not the way you think. My skin crawled. I forced myself to stay calm. Then what about me? Am I real? His expression darkened. You're the only thing that is. A chill ran through me. I checked my phone again. My note was still there. Good. Then the train lurched. A horrible pressure built up in the air, like the entire subway car was being squeezed. The lights flickered, but worse this time. Longer. The man grabbed my arm. His fingers were ice cold. It's happening again. I gritted my teeth. No, not yet. Not before I figure this out. The train shook harder. The old man with the phone glitched. I saw it. For a split second, his entire body twitched, like a broken video file skipping frames. I turned to the man next to me, my heart hammering. What was that? He just shook his head. I told you, none of this is real. The lights flickered violently. I clenched my fists. Then why am I here? What am I supposed to do? The man grabbed my wrist. His grip was strong, urgent. Find what's different. I frowned. What? The train lurched again. The pressure was unbearable now. Find what's different. The man yelled over the sound of the train. Then, everything went black. I woke up gasping for air. The subway car. The same seat. The same dim lights. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My hands were shaking. I already knew what I was going to see before I turned my head. The man was sitting next to me. He didn't say anything this time. He just watched, waiting. I clenched my fists. I wrote something in my phone, I said, my voice hoarse. I wrote a note. He nodded. I yanked my phone out of my pocket and opened the Notes app. My heart sank. The note was gone. My hands trembled. I flipped through my apps, searching. I checked my texts. The same unread message was still there. Don't talk to him. But my note, the proof I had left for myself, was erased. I let out a slow, shaky breath. The man tilted his head slightly. You have to find something stronger. Stronger? I whispered. What does that mean? He didn't answer. The train rumbled forward. My stop was coming up. I had tried to leave before. It didn't work, but maybe I had done it the wrong way. I stood up. I'm getting off at my stop. The man sighed, leaning back against his seat. No, you're not. I ignored him. The train slowed down, and the name of my stop flashed on the overhead sign. The doors would open. They had to open. I stood in front of them, waiting. The train stopped. I reached forward, my hand hovering over the doors. Any second now. I counted in my head. 3, 2, 1. The doors didn't open. I pressed the button. Nothing happened. I banged my fist against the door. Open. The train jerked forward. No. I muttered. No, no, no. The station blurred past as the subway picked up speed. I spun around. The passengers still weren't reacting. They sat completely still, completely unaware. The old man with his phone, the woman with her empty stare, the kid with the headphones. They didn't move, like they weren't even real. I turned back to the man, my chest tight. Why won't it stop? He met my gaze. Because this isn't about leaving the train. I felt a sharp chill crawl up my spine. Then what is this about? His expression darkened. Finding what's different. The words hit me hard. He had said that before. Find what's different. I looked around the train car again. It was the same as before. The same passengers. The same dull flickering lights. But then I noticed something. Something small. The old man's phone. The last time he had been scrolling. But now, he wasn't touching it at all. I stared. My stomach twisted. I turned to the man beside me. That's different. He smiled. Good. The train rattled forward, the pressure in the air building again. I took a slow step toward the old man. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached out. As soon as my fingers brushed the edge of his phone, the old man's head snapped toward me. My breath caught in my throat. His eyes were wrong. Wide, black, empty. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just a horrible choke sound. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering. What is this? The man beside me stood up. You touched something real. The pressure in the air grew unbearable. The subway car groaned like the metal was twisting in on itself. The old man was still staring at me. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. I grabbed his phone out of his hands. The screen flickered. Lines of static ran through it. For a split second, I saw something flash across the screen. A photo. It was blurry, but I saw myself, standing in the subway, talking to the man beside me. But in the photo, there was something behind me. A shape, a shadow, watching. The train shook violently. The lights flickered again, longer this time. I clenched my teeth. I couldn't let it reset. Not again. I gripped the phone tighter. What do I do? The man was already fading. His voice was distant, like a whisper in my ear. Find the truth before it finds you. Then, everything went black. I jolted awake again. Same subway car. Same hum of the train. I was still here. Still trapped. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my phone and checked the date. Still wrong. The same 3 months in the past. My heart pounded as I opened my messages. The warning text was still there, staring at me. Don't talk to him. I gritted my teeth, my hands trembling. The man was sitting beside me, his eyes fixed on me like he was waiting for my reaction. I didn't bother looking at him. Instead, I focused on my phone. If everything reset, then maybe the answers were somewhere I hadn't looked yet. I opened my photo gallery. The pictures were wrong. Photos I didn't recognize. Places I had never been. Faces of people I couldn't name. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. One photo caught my eye, a picture of my apartment, but different. The furniture was rearranged. The walls painted a color I'd never chosen. And the date? Months ago. I felt my stomach turn. I scrolled further, finding more pictures. Photos of me, but not quite right. I was wearing clothes I didn't own, standing in places I had never visited. There was a video too, just a few seconds long. My hand shook as I tapped on it. The screen flickered, then showed me sitting in this exact subway car, looking straight into the camera. My eyes were wide, panicked. If you're watching this, my recorded self whispered, you need to find out what happened before it starts again. Before you forget. The video cut out, leaving the screen black. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen. The man beside me spoke softly. Do you remember now? I turned to him, my jaw tight. Remember what? What happened to me? He sighed. What always happens? I clenched my fists. Stop being vague. Just tell me. He looked around the subway car, his eyes lingering on each passenger. You were looking for answers. You always are. I followed his gaze. The old man with his phone. The woman staring into space. The kid with headphones. I stood up, moving through the car. None of them reacted. I waved my hand in front of the woman's face. Nothing. I ripped one of the kid's headphones off his ear. No response. I glanced back at the man. They're not real, are they? He shook his head slowly. They're just part of the loop. I felt the walls closing in. So, what am I supposed to do? Just keep looping forever. He stood up, walking over to me. His eyes were dark, serious. You need to understand why you're here. What you're trying to fix. I shook my head, frustration boiling over. I don't know. I don't remember. His expression softened. You never do. That's the point. I backed up, pressing myself against the cool metal of the subway doors. Then how do I stop it? You have to remember what you did, he said softly. My heart skipped a beat. What I did? He nodded. What started the loop? Why you're trapped here? The train began to slow down. Another station. Another chance to get off. I glanced at the sign as we pulled in. The name of the station was familiar, but something about it felt wrong. I turned to the man. Is this where it started? He watched me carefully. Do you remember it? I hesitated, my mind racing. Not exactly. But the longer I looked at the station, the more a sickening feeling grew in my gut. I took a step toward the doors as they slid open. The man grabbed my arm. His grip was firm, almost desperate. If you get off here, you have to be ready to face it. My pulse pounded in my ears. Face what? His eyes met mine, filled with a strange mix of pity and fear. Yourself. I swallowed hard. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The station was eerily empty. No one waiting on the platform. No sound except the faint hum of the train. I took a shaky step forward, then another. Daniel, the man called out behind me. I paused, looking back. Whatever you see out there, he said quietly, remember, it's not about what you did. It's about what you try to hide. The doors began to close. I jumped out, landing hard on the platform. As the train pulled away, I saw his face through the window, watching me leave. For the first time, he looked truly afraid. And then, I was alone. The silence of the empty station pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I turned around, facing the dimly lit corridor leading out of the station. My own footsteps echoed unnaturally loud as I moved forward. Whatever was waiting for me, I knew it was the only way to end this, to break the loop, to finally remember. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, the shadow and the reflection, that dark shape standing behind me, watching. It wasn't just some trick of the light. It was there, and I had no memory of it. I turned to the man beside me. What is that thing? His face was unreadable. You already know. I clenched my fists. No, I don't. He sighed. Then why does it scare you? I didn't have an answer. Because he was right. I was afraid. Not just of the shadow. Not just of the loop. I was afraid of remembering. I exhaled shakily. Tell me what I forgot." He hesitated. Then he said, "I can't, but I can help you see it." Before I could ask what he meant, the train lurched again, harder this time. The lights flickered violently, casting everything in rapid flashes of darkness and pale, white glow. I gripped the pole next to me to stay steady. The man was watching me carefully. "It's getting closer." I swallowed hard. "What is?" He didn't answer. The train sped up, faster than before. The passengers still weren't reacting. The old man was still staring blankly ahead, his phone still in his hand, though the screen was nothing but static now. The businesswoman wasn't blinking. The kid with the headphones had his mouth slightly open, like he had been about to say something, but never got the chance. I turned back to the man, my breathing uneven. "What do I do?" "Find the memory." "What memory?" He looked me dead in the eye. "The one you buried." I shook my head. "I don't remember burying anything." His lips pressed together. "Exactly." The train was too fast now. The pressure in the air made my ears pop. I clutched my head, squeezing my eyes shut. And then I saw it. A flash. A moment. I was standing in the subway. But it was wrong. The lighting was different, darker. The train was empty. No passengers. No sounds. And then, a voice. A whisper. "Daniel." I turned. The shadow was there. Not in a reflection this time. In front of me. I couldn't see its face. Just a black, shifting form, like smoke in the shape of a person. It reached toward me. I stepped back. "What are you?" I whispered. The whisper came again, right in my ear. "You already know." The world snapped back into place. I gasped, looking around. I was back in my seat. The train was still moving, but slower now. The flickering had stopped. The man was staring at me. "You saw it, didn't you?" I gripped my knees, my whole body trembling. "I don't understand." He leaned in slightly. "Yes, you do." I shook my head. "I've never seen that thing before in my life." His gaze darkened. "Then why does it know your name?" I had no answer, because I had been asking myself the same thing. The train slowed even more. The pressure in the air was fading, but something else was taking its place. A weight in my chest. Something was missing. A piece of the puzzle, right in front of me, but I couldn't see it. I forced myself to focus. What had changed? I checked my phone again, and I froze. The date had changed. Before, it was months behind. But now it was only 1 day behind. My heart pounded. It was progress. Something was shifting. The man saw my expression and gave a small nod. "You're starting to break through." I looked at him sharply. "What happens when I do?" He didn't answer right away. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "You'll have to face it." I swallowed hard. Face what? I already knew. The shadow. The thing in the reflection. The thing that knew my name. The train rattled forward, heading somewhere I wasn't ready to go. But I didn't have a choice anymore. I had to remember, before it was too late. The train kept moving. Slower now, but still pushing forward. Something was different this time. I could feel it. The air wasn't as thick. The pressure that had been building every time the loop reset was fading, but not in a way that made me feel safe. More like something was waiting, watching. The man beside me hadn't spoken in a while. He just sat there, tapping his fingers against his knee, deep in thought. I swallowed hard. "Tell me the truth." He glanced at me. "About what?" "This." I gestured around the subway car. The loop. The shadow. All of it. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're not ready." I gritted my teeth. "I don't care if I'm ready or not. I need to know." He stared at me for a long time. Then, finally, he said, "You've been here before. More times than you realize." My stomach twisted. "How many times?" I whispered. His eyes darkened. I stopped counting. I felt sick. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Every time you get close, just like now, you start to remember. You start to see it. But then, I finished for him. It resets. He nodded. I shook my head. But why? What's stopping me from breaking out? He hesitated. Then he said something that sent a chill through me. You are. I blinked. What? His expression was serious. You're keeping yourself here. My hands curled into fists. That doesn't make any sense. Think about it, Daniel. The shadow. The memory you can't reach. The thing you refuse to face. He leaned back, shaking his head. This isn't happening to you. You're making it happen. A cold feeling settled in my chest. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, I knew he wasn't. Something in me didn't want to remember. Something in me was afraid. I exhaled shakily. Then tell me what happens if I do remember. What happens if I face it? The man's jaw tightened. You break the loop? I swallowed. And if I don't? He held my gaze. Then you stay here. Forever. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. Forever. Stuck in this train. Stuck in this loop. Over and over and over. No way out. I gripped the pole next to me, trying to keep my breathing steady. I can't do that. I need to get out. He gave a small nod. Then you know what you have to do. I nodded back, but the truth was I didn't. Not really. How was I supposed to face something I couldn't even remember? The train slowed down again. But this time it wasn't my stop. It was a different station, one I didn't recognize. The overhead lights flickered, casting long, twisting shadows across the floor. The man beside me tensed. I frowned. What is this place? He didn't answer. The door slid open with a low hiss. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone got on. I held my breath. It wasn't just a regular passenger. I knew that immediately. They were tall, too tall. Their head nearly brushed the ceiling. Their face was hidden beneath the hood of a long, dark coat. They stepped onto the train in slow, deliberate movements. The air around them felt wrong. Heavy. Electric. I shrank back into my seat, every instinct screaming at me to run. But the man beside me didn't move. He just watched the figure carefully, his expression unreadable. The doors slid shut. The train started moving again. The figure didn't sit down, didn't grab onto anything for balance. They just stood there, facing me. My skin crawled. I turned to the man, my voice barely above a whisper. Who was that? His face was pale now. He exhaled slowly. Your last warning. My mouth went dry. Warning for what? He didn't answer. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. But I could feel it. Staring. Waiting. A single thought ran through my mind, cold and sharp. This time is different. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't sure if I was going to survive it. The figure didn't move. Neither did I. The train rumbled forward, but the air in the subway car felt completely still, like the moment before a thunderstorm. I gripped the pole next to me, trying to steady my breathing. The figure was just standing there, their hooded head slightly tilted, as if studying me. I didn't know what I was expecting. For them to speak? To move? To do anything? But they didn't. And that was worse. I turned slowly to the man beside me. What is that thing? His face was blank. Your last chance? A chill ran through me. Last chance for what? I whispered. He didn't answer. The train lights flickered. The passengers around me, the old man, the woman, the kid, didn't react. They never reacted. It was just me, the man beside me, and the thing watching me. The figure took a step forward. The sound of their foot hitting the train floor was impossibly loud, like a gunshot in a silent room. I flinched. They took another step, then another. I shrank back, pressing against my seat. Stop. They didn't. I turned to the man beside me. Do something. He shook his head slowly. This is all you, Daniel. My breathing came fast and shallow. The figure was close now. Too close. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't move. I could feel them staring. Even though their face was hidden, I could feel it. They reached into their coat. I tensed, and then they pulled something out. A phone. My phone. The exact same model, the exact same case, down to the little crack in the corner. They held it out to me. I stared at it. My fingers twitched. I knew I shouldn't take it. I knew that. But my hand moved anyway. I reached forward. My fingertips brushed the phone's surface. And the second I touched it, the world broke. The train collapsed inward. The walls stretched, twisted, shattered. The floor dissolved beneath me. The pressure in my head was unbearable, like something was clawing its way inside my skull. I heard whispers, hundreds of them, some far away, some right next to my ear. I squeezed my eyes shut. Daniel. The voice was inside me now. It didn't belong to the figure. It didn't belong to the man. It belonged to me. I gasped for air, but there was none. Just a void, swallowing me whole. And then, I woke up, back in the subway, sitting in my seat, the hum of the train, the dim lights, the same passengers, the old man, the woman, the kid, the man beside me, exactly where he always was. I sucked in a breath, my entire body shaking, my hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. I turned my head slowly. The man was looking at me, but this time, he looked defeated, like he already knew what I was going to say. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." He sighed. It reset. I clenched my teeth. I was so close. He nodded. I exhaled shakily, my pulse pounding in my ears. I remembered this time. I remembered everything. The shadow, the loop, the warning, and most of all, the thing that had given me the phone. I gritted my teeth. This time is different. The man's gaze sharpened. I held up my own phone, opened the Notes app, typed one word. Remember. I saved it, locked the screen, looked back at the man. I'm breaking out. He gave a small, almost proud smile. "Then let's finish this." The train rumbled forward, taking me to the one thing I had been running from this entire time. And this time, I was ready to face it. The train moved forward, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Not this time. I gripped my phone tightly, my fingers shaking, but I wasn't going to let go. I had written it down. I had left myself proof. "Remember." I turned to the man beside me. "What happens now?" He studied me for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, "You tell me." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "This is your loop, Daniel. You made it. You're the only one who can break it." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to breathe through it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos. The video was still there, the one I had found before. I tapped play. I watched myself on the screen, sitting on this very train, looking around nervously. The man sat down beside me. But this time, I let the video play longer, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The shadow, not in the reflection this time, behind me. It had been there the entire time. But as the video continued, I saw something even worse. In the footage, I turned my head, just slightly, like I felt something watching me. And then in the video, I whispered something. I turned up the volume. Listened carefully. My own voice. Weak. Terrified. "I don't want to remember." A chill ran through me. I turned to the man beside me, my hands numb. "I said that before." He nodded. "Every time." The train rumbled beneath us. I clenched my jaw. "Why?" His eyes darkened. "Because whatever happened, you made yourself forget." My chest felt tight. The figure from before, the one who had handed me the phone, they were part of this. But they were trying to trap me. They were trying to force me to remember. I closed my eyes, forced myself to think. What was I missing? What had I buried so deep that my own mind had locked it away? The train slowed. I opened my eyes. We were pulling into the wrong station again. The same place from before. The one that felt wrong. The man beside me didn't move. He just waited. The doors slid open, and I knew this was it. I stood up. My legs were weak, but I forced myself forward. The station was empty. Cold. silent. I stepped off the train. The air was thick, heavy. I could barely breathe. Then I saw it, at the far end of the platform. A mirror. Tall. Old. The glass was dark and warped, like something was moving inside it. I swallowed hard. My heart pounded. I knew, without a doubt, that whatever I had forgotten, it was inside that mirror. I turned back to the train. The man was watching me. "This is the part where you usually run," he said softly. I shook my head. "Not this time." I walked forward. Every step was harder than the last, like the ground was pulling me back. I reached the mirror. My own reflection stared back at me. Except, it wasn't just me. The shadow was there too, right behind me. And then, it whispered, "You know why you're here." Memories crashed over me. A moment. A night. A decision. I had been here before. Not just in the loop. In real life. I had stood on this platform, staring at this mirror. And I had made a choice. A choice to forget. I stumbled back, my chest tight. "No," I whispered. "No, I didn't." The shadow moved closer. "Yes, you did." I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to remember. I had buried this for a reason. But the loop wasn't going to break unless I faced it. I took a deep breath, and I looked. The reflection changed. And finally, I remembered. And I wished I hadn't. The mirror wasn't just showing my reflection anymore. It was showing a memory. My memory. I saw myself standing in this same station months ago. The lighting was dim, the air heavy, just like now. But there was someone else with me. A woman. She stood a few feet away, her back to me. Her dark coat swayed slightly, her hair falling over her shoulders. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring into the mirror. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I knew her, but I didn't want to. My reflection in the mirror moved, but I didn't. The version of me in the memory stepped forward. He reached out a shaking hand toward the woman's shoulder. "We can't keep doing this," my voice whispered. The woman turned slightly, just enough for me to see her face. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. It was her, and suddenly it all came rushing back. She was important. She was the reason I was here, and I had erased her. The memory kept going, even though I wanted it to stop. She looked at me, her expression sad. "It's already done, Daniel." I saw myself shake my head. "No, we can fix this. We have to." She smiled, but it wasn't happy. It was final. "You'll forget." The version of me in the memory froze. The mirror in the reflection warped, dark shapes curling at the edges of the glass. I watched in horror as my past self backed away. "No," I whispered. "I wouldn't just leave you." But that's exactly what I had done. I had turned, walked away, and the moment my past self stepped onto the train, she disappeared. The memory shattered like broken glass. I staggered back, gasping for air. I wasn't in the station anymore. I was back on the train. The man was still beside me, watching carefully. I turned to him, my hands shaking. Who was she? His expression was unreadable. "You tell me." I clenched my fists. I knew her, but the details were slipping through my fingers, like trying to remember a dream right after waking up. The train rattled. The pressure in the air returned. The loop was closing in. I had to hold on to this memory. I opened my phone, quickly typing. The woman. The mirror. Don't forget. I hit save. My heart was racing. The man beside me exhaled. "It's not enough, Daniel." I turned to him sharply. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his voice serious. "You remembered her, but you still don't know why you're here." My mouth went dry. "Why did I erase her?" he asked. "Why did you choose to forget?" I shook my head. "I don't know." The train slowed. The doors opened. I knew what was waiting for me outside. The mirror. And this time, I had to go through it. I stood up, my knees weak. The man beside me didn't follow. I turned back to him. "Aren't you coming?" His smile was faint. "I never do." I hesitated. I had always needed him here. Every loop, every reset, he had been my guide. But I knew now, he was only here to get me this far. The rest, I had to do it alone. I nodded once. Then I stepped off the train and walked straight toward the mirror. The mirror waited for me. It was taller than I remembered, stretching from the floor to the ceiling of the empty station. The surface rippled slightly, like water disturbed by an unseen force. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed not to go near it. But I knew I had to. This was where it all started. And if I wanted to escape, if I wanted to finally break the loop, I had to step through. I swallowed hard and took a slow step forward. Then another. The closer I got, the more the air around me changed. The temperature dropped. The silence became almost deafening. The walls of the station seemed to bend, like I was moving deeper into something that wasn't supposed to exist. I stopped right in front of the glass. My reflection stared back, but something was wrong. It wasn't copying me. It was just watching. Then, it smiled. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The reflection's lips curled, slow and deliberate, while mine stayed perfectly still. I turned my head slightly. The reflection didn't. It was like I was staring at a different version of myself, one that knew something I didn't. I forced myself to speak. "Who are you?" The reflection's smile widened. Then, it stepped forward. Not me, just it. It moved out of the glass. I froze. My chest tightened, my instincts screaming at me to run. The reflection, the other me, tilted its head, studying me. Then, in a voice that was almost, but not quite mine, it whispered, "You should have left when you had the chance." I barely had time to react before it lunged. I stumbled backward as its hands shot toward me, fingers curling like claws. I barely dodged. The thing, my reflection, my shadow, whatever it was, moved fast. Faster than me. It wasn't just trying to stop me. It was trying to take my place. I turned to run, but the station was gone. Everything was black. Endless, suffocating darkness. The only thing left was me. In it, I backed away, my pulse hammering. The thing smiled wider, stretching too far. "You ran away once," it whispered. "You can't run again." I shook my head. I don't even know what I ran from. It took a slow step forward. "Then let me show you." The darkness collapsed inward, and suddenly, I wasn't in the void anymore. I was back in the past, back on this very station. And this time I saw everything. I saw her, the woman I had erased. She was standing in front of the mirror, just like before. But this time I saw myself too, my real self. I was standing behind her, my expression pale. My hands were shaking. "We can't fix this," she whispered. I stepped closer. "We have to try." Her voice was barely audible. "It's already too late." Then, for the first time, I saw what was inside the mirror. A dark shape, moving, waiting. And then, she turned to me. Her eyes, they were wrong. They weren't hers anymore. A cold wave of horror crashed over me. She wasn't real. Not anymore. She was already part of the mirror. And I had known it. That's why I left. That's why I forced myself to forget. Because the woman I had loved was gone. And the thing standing in front of me that night wasn't her. I stumbled back, my breath shaking. The past version of me did the same. Then, I turned, and I ran. I ran onto the train. I ran from the truth. And the moment the doors slid shut behind me, the loop began. The memory shattered. I gasped, falling to my knees. I was back in the station, back in front of the mirror. My reflection stood over me, still smiling. "Now you remember," it whispered. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't run anymore. I had to face what I had done. I had abandoned her. And now, the loop was giving me one last chance to fix it. I stayed on my knees, gasping for breath. The memory had hit me like a train, slamming into my mind so hard it left me dizzy. I had abandoned her. I had left her there, standing in front of the mirror, knowing she wasn't herself anymore. And then I had run. That was the moment I had broken something inside me. The moment I had forced myself to forget. The moment the loop began. I slowly lifted my head. My reflection was still standing over me, still smiling. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I understood now. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a ghost. It was me. The part of me that had refused to face the truth. The part of me that had locked myself in this loop to avoid the guilt, the fear, the horror of what I had done. And now, it was daring me to do it again. To run. To forget. I forced myself to stand. My legs were weak, but I didn't back down. My reflection tilted its head slightly. "You know what happens next?" it said. I swallowed hard. "Yeah." It stepped closer. "So what's it going to be?" I clenched my fists. The loop had started because I had run away. The only way to break it was to go back. I turned toward the mirror. The glass shifted. The surface rippled like the entrance to somewhere else. Somewhere I had been before. Somewhere I had left her. I hesitated for only a second. Then I stepped through. The world twisted. The cold, empty subway station disappeared. And when I opened my eyes, I was back to the night it happened. The air was thick. The lighting was dim. And she was standing there, right in front of the mirror. I exhaled shakily, forcing myself to move forward. She didn't react to my footsteps. Didn't turn to face me. I swallowed. Anna. Her shoulders tensed. Slowly, she turned. Her face, it was almost the same. Almost. But now that I knew the truth, I could see it. The little details. The wrongness. Her eyes were too dark. Her skin was too pale. And when she blinked, it was too slow. Like something inside her was struggling to act human. A cold sweat broke out along my back. This wasn't her. Not anymore. And I had known that before. That's why I had run. But this time, I didn't run. I forced myself to step closer. "You're not her," I whispered. She smiled. "Aren't I?" Her voice was almost right. Almost. I shook my head. "I should have helped you." Her expression flickered, like she hadn't expected me to say that. The thing inside her, the thing that had been waiting in the mirror, shifted slightly. I took a deep breath. "I left you here, and I trapped myself in this nightmare because I was too much of a coward to face what happened." Her head tilted. "And now," I swallowed hard, "now I'm setting us both free." I reached into my pocket. My phone, the same one I had carried through every loop. I pulled it out and opened the Notes app. "Remember." The word was still there. I turned the screen toward her. "You're the reason I was stuck. Because I refused to remember you. But I do now. And I won't forget again." Her dark eyes flickered. And then, the world cracked. The air split apart like glass shattering. The mirror behind her rippled violently, distorting her reflection. She gasped, her form flickering, breaking, fading. For the first time, I saw something in her expression that almost looked like relief. Then she whispered, "Good," and she disappeared. The mirror shattered. The station collapsed inward. And then, everything went white. I woke up. The train was real this time. I felt it immediately. The weight was gone. The pressure. The endless cycle. I turned to my right, expecting to see the man sitting beside me. But the seat was empty. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the pole in front of me. The train slowed. I looked up at the sign overhead. It was my stop, and this time, the doors opened. I stepped out onto the platform, my heart still racing. The cold night air hit my face, and I knew it was over. I had escaped, but as I walked toward the exit, I felt it, a faint whisper at the back of my mind. Soft, familiar. "Don't forget." I turned back. The subway doors slid shut. The train pulled away. And in the window, for just a second, I thought I saw her, smiling. Then she was gone, and I walked away, finally free. I stepped off the subway, shaking my head. That was strange. No, not strange, insane. The whole thing felt like a fever dream. The endless loop, the strange man, the shadow, Anna. But it couldn't have been real. I was exhausted. I had worked too much, barely eaten, and probably just fell asleep on the subway. That's all it was. A bad dream. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold night air on my face. The city was alive around me. People moving in every direction, cars honking in the distance. Everything was normal. I let out a small, relieved chuckle. I had just imagined the whole thing. I walked home, took off my coat, and went straight to the kitchen. I was starving. After cooking up something quick, I sat down on the couch, flipping on the TV. Some mindless show played in the background while I ate, but my mind kept drifting. The dream had felt so real. The subway, the stranger, the way the train doors refused to open. I exhaled slowly. It didn't matter. I shook it off and kept eating. Eventually, my body relaxed. The tension I didn't even realize I had been holding and started to fade. But then, a small detail came back to me. The notes. In the dream, I had written things down. Remember, don't forget. Notes I had typed desperately, trying to hold on to something real. I smirked slightly to myself. God, I really had lost it, huh? Still, just out of curiosity, I pulled out my phone. I opened the Notes app, expecting it to be empty. And then, I froze. Because there they were. All of them. Every single note I had written in the dream. Remember, don't forget. Anna. My smile faded. I sat up straighter, my stomach twisting. This wasn't possible. I scrolled down, my fingers trembling. The timestamps were wrong. Some of these notes were from days ago, some from weeks, but that didn't make sense. I had never typed these before, had I? A chill ran down my spine. I locked my phone and put it face down on the table, rubbing my hands over my face. It was just a trick of my mind, some weird half-awake thing where I had actually typed them in my sleep. That had to be it, right? I turned back to the TV, forcing myself to focus on the show. Ignore it. Move on. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something, a faint reflection in the TV screen. A figure, standing just behind me. I turned fast, heart pounding. Nothing. No one was there. I stared at the empty room, my breathing shallow. Slowly, I turned back to the TV. The reflection was gone, but my whole body was covered in goosebumps. And that feeling, the unnerving, heavy feeling, had returned. I tried to shake it off, but over the next few days, it only got worse. Little things. A flicker in a glass window. A shape in my laptop screen. A woman's reflection where there shouldn't be one. Every time I turned, it vanished. Every time my stomach twisted, I told myself it was just stress, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. And that's why I'm writing this now. Because I need to know, has this happened to anyone else? Has anyone ever dreamed something so vividly, only to find evidence of it in real life? If you've seen something, if you've experienced something like this, please tell me. Because I need to know, did I wake up? Or am I still trapped? Was it just a dream? Or did something follow him back? If you've ever experienced something like this, something you can't explain, let me know. And if you have a story of your own, send it to my email. I'll be sharing more of your stories in the next videos. Stay safe, and always pay attention to the reflections around you.